This conference will now be recorded.
Well, thank you all for joining me today on February the 7th in 2022. Today we have a very special treat, which is we have Jim Gottstein is going to be our guest speaker. And I don't want to steal any of his thunder, but I will say this because I have it right here. He is the author, and let me see if I can get it on the screen there, of the Zyprexa Papers. So again, I don't want to steal any of his thunder. Maybe the only thing I'll say is he normally lives in Alaska. He's actually joining us today from Hawaii, which is very exciting, and I'm sure makes all of us very jealous, except for maybe Patrick, who's in Ireland. Um, this meeting will have this meeting will have three parts. The first part is I'll mute everybody and unmute you one at a time, give you a minute or two to introduce yourself, say who you are, what you do, products and services, where you are geographically, and maybe what a good referral for you would be. The second part of the meeting is sometimes those introductions trigger some questions or comments or people that want to dig in a little bit deeper about what you do. So we'll take a couple of minutes to do that. And then hopefully we'll have at least 30 minutes left for Jim, who will be the last one, and he can introduce himself and then take the remainder of the time as our guest speaker. And I know he also wants to do use some slides for a presentation. So we'll do that. And then my goal is to get you out of here somewhere between 45 to 55 minutes after the hour. And so we have Lena that just joined us. Lena, how are you? Welcome.
Thank you, Elsa. Yes, thanks for having me.
Very good. So just real quick, we're going to do a round of introductions and then we'll turn it over to our guest speaker. So let me see. Oh, the first person on my list is a new person. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to just skip for one and come back. So Jennifer, since you've been here many times, I don't want to start with a newbie just so they get the idea. Can you take a minute or two, please, to introduce yourself? And by the way, thank you for organizing this because Jennifer's the one that connected us with Jim and kind of helped us set him up as our guest speaker. So thank you very much for doing that. So Jennifer, you want to take a minute or two to introduce yourself, please?
Sure, thanks, Hal. My name is Jennifer Lau. I run Jen Lau Agency. I'm a consultant to non-governmental organizations, mainly nonprofits. I consult to all areas of nonprofits after about a 25-year career in the nonprofit sector. Currently, I'm running a few fundraising campaigns and a political campaign. So a good contact for me is a nonprofit or a political candidate.
All right, perfect. Excellent. Thank you very much. And then I will loop back. And Andrea, just it's that simple. Just take a minute or two, introduce yourself, where you're at geographically, who would be a good referral for you.
Yeah, I am sort of new to Pittsburgh in the process of relocating here. I am a certified book ghostwriter, so I help people with their books. Maybe people like Jim don't need a ghostwriter, but I can also help with editing or structuring the book, even give you a marketing plan. Whether it's a business book, memoir, fiction, anything, if you or someone you know really has a book idea that they want to get out into the world, I'm happy to talk with anyone, give advice, even if we don't end up working together. So I'm all about books.
Perfect, excellent. And I have a question or two for you, but we'll leave it for round two. Oh, we have another veteran here. Jerry, same thing. If you want to take a minute or two and introduce yourself, please.
Sure. Jerry Luco, ATD Business Consulting, and I have a DBA of Franchise Business Source. So I spend most of my time playing executive recruiter for people that want to own a business and are looking at franchise businesses and matching them up to hopefully one of the 300 plus businesses that I represent. Not everyone has the next great big idea, but they want to have their own business and take responsibility for how they grow. And I work through finding the perfect fit franchise that gets them lifestyle, flexibility, money, freedom, whatever it is they're dreaming of. Owning a business is, one of my business coaches says, is trauma, but it's really nice to have that operational playbook to help you through it. Jerry Luco with Franchise Business Source.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And by the way, one of the nice things about having a lot of veterans on this call is they know the drill better than I do. So I just saw, please don't forget to put your contact information in the chat, because later tonight I will take whatever you put in the chat and I will send it to everybody on the call. So if you want to put on there your email, your phone number, your website, whatever you want to put in the chat is more than welcome, and I'll pass it to everybody here. Conversely, if you don't want me to pass it to everybody here, please don't put it in the chat. All right, here we go. Well, next one on my list is actually Jim, but I'm going to skip him because he's going to be our guest speaker and take the balance of the time. So now I am going to go with, is it Lena? Lena? If you, yeah, there you go. Unmute yourself from your side and the same thing, kind of give us your introduction.
Hi there, everyone. I'm Lena. I'm the founder at empowerbusinessclub.com. So I'm taking my over 25 years of experience and my love of empowering others to set up their online businesses via empowerbusinessclub.com. So we basically empower business professionals and companies to set up their own online businesses. And we have hundreds of assets online. 6 solutions, internet consultancy solutions with 50% off if you choose to go with membership, and 8 benefits via this online platform for business professionals and companies. So my name is Lena Benjamin, and I'm the founder and internet venture consultant at empowerbusinessclub.com.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much. And let me keep going down my list here. And Paolo, if you could unmute yourself from your side and give us your introduction, please.
Sure, thanks, Sal. Good to see everyone, and glad to have Jim joining us. So I'll try to keep this short and give him as much time as possible. My name is Paolo Agustinelli, and I am the owner of Equitas Funding Group. We're a real estate investment firm, and we buy, renovate, rent, and sell residential commercial real estate in the Pittsburgh area and elsewhere as well. Also, I'm a member of the Pittsburgh Real Estate Investors Association, Pittsburgh RIA, and I lead our commercial real estate networking group. So if there is anything, either small business wise or real estate wise, that anyone has a question on, wants to discuss, not only can I possibly help you directly, but again, I'm part of lead a pretty large network here in the Pittsburgh area and across the country, actually, to help connect any dots you need help connecting. So please reach out if you would like to discuss anything. Again, thanks, Sal, and good to see everyone this afternoon.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Paolo. Let's see who we have here. Oh, Patrick. If you could introduce yourself, please.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
I was thinking about you yesterday, Sal, and I said, how could I possibly forget to join up this evening with all the notifications and the encouragement from Sal? Thank you, Sal. And Jennifer, thanks for enabling me to hear Jim Gottstein. Look at everybody. I'm in the health and wellness space, and because nothing happens in our body or any cell without being signaled. Now, this is gaining momentum, this understanding, because every second of every day, our cells are passing tremendous amounts of information throughout the body, and any breakdown in that signaling and communication, we cannot be fully healthy. For example, we receive a signal when we're feeling hungry, cold, thirsty, tired, injured, stressed out. A bathroom call in the middle of the day or the one in the middle of the night is really impressive. Now, redox signaling goes beyond nutrition, beyond ingredients, and impacts the body at a depth that no other supplement has ever come close to achieving. You and those you know deserve to know about this breakthrough, particularly those with a health challenge, people who are health conscious, or those interested in generating an additional income stream, now in 33 countries, opening up tremendous financial opportunity. So who springs to mind? Because this business fits into the busiest of schedules. My request to each of you is to connect with me and those you know that deserve to know about this technology. What you do with it is up to you. My thanks to you all for enabling me to understand what you are doing and the gift of your attention. My details are in the chat. Thank you.
Perfect. Fantastic. Thank you. And Rhoda, you know what? I promise one of these days, and maybe you can remind me, I'll do it backwards. I'll start from the bottom up. But for now, if you want to take your turn and introduce yourself, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm in Indianapolis, Indiana. My company is called Say It For You, and it's coincidental. So, Andrea, we ought to talk. I, too, am a ghostwriter, but I function in a different arena of ghostwriting. So my team and I, for the past 14 years, have been ghostwriting blogs and webpage content for businesses and professionals and organizations that are trying to capture attention of their constituency by showing that they're in the now and in the know, that they have an opinion to state, they have valuable information to impart, and so people want to visit them and see them as spheres of influence. So we are a team, a one-woman business with a team of subcontracted ghostwriters. And right now, I am actually looking for service providers, particularly heating and cooling, very practical things, moving, services that people need to know about, and they have questions. So that one of the functions of a blog is to answer those questions before they're even asked. So we say it for you.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you. Well, and before I turn it over to Jim, does anybody have any questions for anybody based on the introductions? No?
I love what Rhoda said, that a blog answers questions before you ask them. I thought that was really good.
Yeah, very good. Very good.
This is vision. This is vision. There's no doubt about it, you know. Well done, Rhoda.
Well, I have a quick question for Andrea, just out of curiosity. You said you'd moved recently to Pittsburgh. Where are you coming from?
Am I unmuted? Yeah.
Yes.
I have kind of lived all over. I was in the Army for a while, then I did humanitarian work, and so I've been around. But I have friends here in Pittsburgh, and I've visited them a couple times, and it just seemed like a fun place to be. Lots of things to do, lots of business opportunities, and so here's where I ended up.
Well, welcome, by the way. This group is actually an outgrowth of an original live lunch meeting that we used to have here in the Pittsburgh area. But of course, now through the magic of the internet, it's gone worldwide. Because as a matter of fact, my another question is, Lena, are you, I think from your description, it said you're in Dubai. Are you in Dubai?
I'll be going there shortly, but I'm currently in London.
Oh, okay. All right. Very good. So yes, I mean, we have quite the spread from Hawaii to Ireland to Dubai. Of course, a lot of Pittsburgh from Pittsburgh and Ohio and Indianapolis. So we're starting to get quite the crowd. Okay, well, listen, without further ado, I want to turn it over to our guest speaker, again, Jim Gottstein. I don't want to steal any of his thunder other than to say, and because some folks joined a little bit late after I showed this is his books, the Zyprexa Papers. In all the emails that I've been sending out and the one that I will send tonight, there's a link to the book on Amazon. So if you haven't bought it, and you want to buy it, you'll have a link so you can go buy it on Amazon. And Jim, the balance of the time is yours. It's about 2:18 here on the East Coast. And again, want to get, let people go 2:45, 2:55. Also, it would be great if you could leave a couple of minutes at the end for questions and answers, because I'm sure there's going to be questions and answers for you. But the balance of the time is yours.
Well, thank you very much. I'll certainly try and leave time for questions and answers. It's a very interesting and impressive group you have here. I'm very pleased to be here. So I'm going to share my screen. Except, oh, there it is. You're probably going to get tired of seeing that. But anyway, well, first off, maybe I'll just say a couple words about myself. I'm a lawyer, and I'm the founder and co-founder of the Law Project for Psychiatric Rights, whose mission is to mount a strategic litigation campaign against forced psychiatric drugging and electroshock. And as part of that, this is the first paragraph of my book. Anyway, I'll just read it. It was just a normal day before David Eagleman called me out of the blue on November 28th, 2006. The days are short that time of year in Anchorage, Alaska, and it was getting dark by mid-afternoon. Dr. Eagleman told me he had been hired as an expert witness by one of the law firms representing patients who had taken Zyprexa and contracted diabetes or other metabolic problems. He wanted to know about documents relating to Zyprexa I might have. In truth, he was feeling me out to see whether I might be willing to subpoena him so he could legally send me secret documents. These documents revealed the pharmaceutical company Eli Lilly had from the beginning suppressed information showing Zyprexa caused these life-threatening conditions. In addition, they showed Lilly had illegally marketed this powerful and dangerous drug for use in children and the elderly. He wanted me to then send them to Alex Berenson, a reporter for the New York Times, with whom he was already working on a Zyprexa expose. So, about 3 weeks later, the front page stories in the New York Times appeared. Well, let me say this. So I knew that I never thought that, frankly, that we would get the documents, because Dr. Eagleman was under this secrecy order that said he had to give Lilly notice and a reasonable opportunity to respond before he gave me the documents. And I thought, well, they would jump right on it, and I would be then in court saying why my client should have access to these documents. But they were slow. But I knew once they got going, they'd be big and fast, and they were. And so a month, pretty much exactly a month after the first New York Times article came out, which that was in December 17th of 2006. On January 17th of 2007, I was hauled in front of United States District Court Judge Jack Weinstein of the United States District Court of in the Eastern District of New York in Brooklyn, where Lilly had was threatening me with. They were seeking a injunction against further distribution of the documents, but before they even knew about it, I had gotten them out, not just to the New York Times, but a lot of activists, former psychiatric patients, psychiatric survivors, they call themselves, and they got them out over the internet. And Lilly was livid, and they threatened me with criminal contempt and to go after my law license. And and Judge Weinstein ultimately decided I had conspired to steal these documents. Anyway, so it's really quite a story, and I knew I had to write a book about it, and so I did. I'm pretty proud of it. So about half of the book is on that subject of the document, the Zyprexa Papers, what happened to them. You know, that the drug probably killed a couple 100,000 people, or at least tens of thousands. And the other part is about my representation of Bill Bigley, the person for whom I subpoenaed the Zyprexa Papers. And one of the things about it that, you know, well, I don't know, it really impacted me was he was about 2 years older than me. Oh, no, 2 months older than me. And he got dragged into the psychiatric system 2 years before I did. And he wasn't lucky the way I was. And his life was just ruined by psychiatry. And so, you know, to me, it was that there but for the grace of God go I. And so a big chunk of the book is about my representation of him and trying to keep psychiatry from further locking him up and drugging him against his will. Okay, so that's the book, and I can talk about that later. But I really want to talk about, you know, why I do this work and why it's important. And so the first thing, can you see the slides, by the way?
Yes,
okay.
we're seeing a chart right now.
Yeah, so the first thing is that since the introduction of the so-called miracle drug Thorazine in the mid-1950s, the disability rate for mental illness in the United States has gone up 7 times. I don't think it's all because of the psych drugs, but I think there's no question that a huge amount of it is because of the psychiatric drugs. I mean, some of it was, you know, welfare work and all that, but basically the drugs are very counterproductive. They knock down symptoms for a little bit, but they damage the brain. The neuroleptics, which are marketed as antipsychotics, even though they don't have antipsychotic principles for most, block 70 to 90% of the dopamine in the frontal lobes, the basal ganglia, and the limbic system. And so I used to say, before I found this out, I used to say they were chemical straitjackets, but literally they're chemical lobotomies. And the response of the brain for a few weeks is to pump out more dopamine to combat the blockage, and then it grows more dopamine receptors. And so they've never found any kind of brain abnormality in people that are diagnosed with schizophrenia or other, you know, things diagnosed as mental illness before the drugs. After the drugs, they see all kinds of changes, including brain shrinkage. And so they're very harmful. And in fact, people in the public mental health system now die 20 to 25 years earlier than the general population. And 120 years ago or 100 years ago, that wasn't true. They had normal lifespans. So these drugs are just very harmful, and they prevent people from getting better. And that's kind of the point I want to make here. So if you look at the current mental health system, basically says everybody has to stay on these drugs for the rest of their lives. And that results in about a 5 or 6% recovery rate. Okay, so this is terrible historically. I'm going to be way early, I think. This is historically terrible. I mean, before the advent of the drugs, you were getting between, 60 and 90% recovery rates. So we've dramatically reduced the recovery rate. by the use of these drugs. Okay, and then and there are approaches that they could kind of more modern, current approaches that have shown really good results. Can you see my cursor by any chance?
Move it around.
Probably not. Anyway, so if you look, so the open dialogue approach in northern Finland, which has gained some traction around the world, they basically say the problem isn't in the person. They say it's in the space between the people. So they basically don't put in that area. They don't put people in psychiatric hospitals, and they really try and avoid use of the neuroleptics. And they bring in the whole family, coworkers, or whatever, and it's to see what's kind of what's the problem, what's causing it, what can we do, including the person. The person is always included. And one of the things that the psychiatric survivor movement says, or consumer survivors, ex-patients, is nothing about us without us. And there's this tendency for people to go and talk about people who are diagnosed with mental illness and not include them. And for one thing, that basically it's just terrible on its own, but it also kind of can feed into someone's feeling that people, let's just call it paranoia, because people are talking about them behind their back. And so that's important, that people be brought in. So, but basically, if you look down where it says psychotic symptoms, asymptomatic at 5-year follow-up, 79%. So basically, they got an 80% recovery rate there. And then if you look, also up above that, antipsychotic use, they had an ongoing use of 20%. So in other words, they basically avoided giving people the neuroleptics. A third of them were given them, at one point, but only 20% were given them basically long term. And so that's, I'm not sure that it's exactly the same 20% or 80% that were not taking them that are recovered, but pretty close to that. And so at the end of 5 years, basically there were only 20% that were on disability. So again, you've got an 80% recovery rate. Okay, so there was this study done by Lauren Mosier, who was the head of schizophrenia research at the National Institute of Mental Health in the 1970s, where they had this house, and they did the same thing. They minimized the use of antipsychotics or neuroleptics. They might use a benzodiazepine like what's one? Xanax or Klonopin to help people, get some sleep, to reestablish their sleep cycle, because basically a very huge percentage of people who become, quote, psychotic, meaning going crazy, are sleep deprived. And they basically had the same thing, where they sit down at the bed and only 19% regularly maintained on the drug. So they basically had an 80% recovery rate too. Okay, so now if you look at people who have been on the drugs for a while, the neuroleptics for a while, and then get off of them, that's what this chart shows, is that if you're off the neuroleptics, if you get off the neuroleptics, you have a 45% recovery rate. Whereas in this, the red part down below is basically the same chart that I showed before that. But if you're on them, you have an 8% or 5 or 6%. So in other words, once you're put on these neuroleptics, your chances of recovery go from 80% to 45% if you get off of them. And so that's why it's, and if you stay on them, 5%. But that's why it's so important to try and avoid getting people put on these neuroleptics in the first instance. I feel like I'm going fast. Okay, and I talked about this before, is that people are dying 25 years earlier in the, they're in the public mental health system, and virtually all of it is attributable to the drugs. Okay, so that, you know, that's my presentation. I can go on at great length, but I thought I'd be available for questions.
No, that's perfect. Thank you very much. And we're here just about 2:35 here on the East Coast. So I have some questions, but I'm going to let everybody else go first because I'm sure it's been very interesting, and I don't think we're going to have a shortage of questions. So Rhoda, you get to go first. Kick us off.
In general, what is the alternative to treating mental illness with drugs?
Well, there are, you know, I mentioned the Soteria approach, the open dialogue approach. Then there's other approach called the Hearing Voices group, where they basically had support groups and for people who are hearing voices, and they one of the interesting things about them is they say they don't ask the question what's wrong with you, but what happened to you. And that's what you find. Almost everybody that gets diagnosed with kind of a classic quote mental illness has had, most people will say there was something that happened to them when they were pretty young that they feel like set them up for, and then something that happened more recently that kind of pushed them over the edge. And so basically people are going through this, normally are terrified. And so you need to interact with them in ways to make them feel safe and be safe. And so the Soteria house was like a normal house. It had, I think, 6 residents and a couple of staff members at all times. They tried to be as normal as possible, and just help people get through it. Most people, 80%, can get through what they, kind of what they're experiencing and on with their lives, if they're allowed to. So one of the things is that our society is, insists on quick fixes. So the idea is, okay, we bring them in, we drug them in, we, basically, the drugs are chemical lobotomies. So they suppress this behavior that's disturbing, but they set people up, and only short term, set people up for long-term failure. So you need to spend time with people. You need to help them with their, with the problems in living that they're having. There's this program called RAP, Wellness Recovery Action Plan, where people learn, they develop this plan. They say, okay, what is it that triggers me? What are the types of things that help? And you set up a plan. What if I have a relapse? What am I going to do? There are things, in addition to Soteria houses, there's this places called like peer respites. So one of the things you find is that people who have gone through the system and experienced it can really relate to people who are, experiencing these things in the current, and can really communicate and, like I said, relate to people in ways that people that haven't gone through it. So that's become well recognized. So I guess I was kind of long-winded on that, but I hope that it gives you some idea.
Perfect. Okay. Another question. Patrick, go ahead.
Jim, I think you should get a seat on the UN Council, because what you've been through is absolutely unbelievable. And we're here now celebrating your success. And but the story behind the success, you know, all the challenges, the sleepless nights, the worries, how they're going to come after you, the threatening, building up fear. I mean, to have weathered all of that, Jim, if you were in England, you'd be knighted, I would hope, you know.
You're very kind. You mentioned
but it's just unbelievable. But the frightening thing is that they keep going. Eli Lilly keep going. I mean, where's regulatory compliance? Who's looking out for the ordinary person?
And by the way, let me interject there real quick. And for people outside the United States, or maybe even outside our region here in the United States, they don't know this, but we've had some big issues with opioids and OxyContin. I don't even know how to pronounce it. And Purdue Pharmaceuticals, I know, had to pay out a lot of money, and that's still even not finalized, I think, as we go. So it's just not this, but other aspects of the pharmaceutical industry that are getting out of control.
Well, basically, it's, and this is kind of a stark statement, but the system is corrupt. The drug companies basically run crooked trials and report on them crookedly. So, for example, for Zyprexa, and this is why Dr. Eagleman called me, because I had put this report on by Dr. Grace Jackson. So, in the clinical trials that where Zyprexa was approved, they did I mean, there are lots of different things, like they didn't accurately account for deaths and those kind of things. But they did two tricks. One was called the placebo washout. And so what that is their so-called placebo were people who were on Haldol, the first generation neuroleptic. But they abruptly withdrew them from Haldol. And you know how I said there was no brain defect before the drugs? Well, people who've been on Haldol, they have all these extra dopamine receptors, and a lot of people then experience pretty serious symptoms because of the withdrawal, not because of anything else. And of course, when that happens normally, then they say, oh, see, your mental illness is coming back, when in fact it's really the withdrawal effect. Okay, so that's who they compared the people who took Zyprexa, people who they chemically made more symptomatic. Okay, so that was kind of crooked. But also there was a certain group of people that do quite well once they're abruptly withdrawn from Haldol. I mean, it's not recommended because of what I just said. But the people that did well, they threw out of the study. So, that skewed the results. And then the other thing was this thing called last observation carried forward. Well, Zyprexa is so unpleasant that people don't want to take it. I mean, people are forced to take it, basically. And so, but in the trial, they can't force people. And so many people just quit the trial. I think it was like 60%. And so what they said was, well, this was a 12-week trial, which of course is nowhere near long enough to tell what really is going to happen in the real world if you put someone on a drug for life. But they said, well, we'll just assume that the person will be at the same place they were when they quit the trial as they would have been at the end of the trial. Well, what's the point of having a 12-week trial if you do that? So I'm not even sure what the question was, but that was my answer. I also wanted to mention that the United Nations has passed the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which is really quite excellent and basically prohibits locking people up and drugging them against their will. But it's not been implemented very much, and the United States hasn't ratified it.
Okay, perfect. All right, so we had questions from Rhoda, for Patrick. Anybody else? I see a lot of people nodding. That's good, but it's, does anybody have a question for Jim? Okay, Paolo, go ahead.
Jim, I have a question for you, and this has been circulating in my head since you showed the first slide, actually, which showed the number of hospitalizations, I believe it was, per capita or per 100,000 population compared to, now compared to decades ago. And it seems like, the number of those hospitalizations have tripled per capita since decades past. So I guess I have a couple questions, because these issues to me are it's a matter of diagnosis and then even treatment. So when you look back from, say, what was going on, okay, great, in the 50s, how back in the 50s, whether it was individuals who we find out now that are actually maybe have autism or something else. So how much of that increase do you think is due to medication and treatment versus accurate diagnosis of the actual issue?
Well, the statistic is actually about people who are disabled. They're basically receiving government assistance for being disabled.
Okay.
So I think that kind of accounts for some of your, question. I do think that maybe, is it easier to get listed as disabled now? That might be an issue. On the other hand, it's actually kind of hard to get listed as disabled and get on Social Security disability income. I think that, and when Clinton was president, they really, did welfare reform. And so they made, the aid to families with dependent children and other forms of welfare kind of disappeared. And so people that maybe just were on general welfare moved over to, get on disability. So I think that accounts for a relatively small fraction of it. But I have to say, and I maybe should have put a slide on this, there's a book called Anatomy of an Epidemic by Robert Whitaker. And it really goes through what the, kind of this whole process, how this all happened. And so, I think when I introduced this slide, I said I didn't think all of it was attributed to the drugs, but the vast majority of it is. And I can't really be more precise than that. I don't think it's so much a question of diagnosis, because people have to be, functionally disabled to the point where they qualify for government assistance to have gotten on that, in that slide.
Okay, thank you.
So, Jim,
I should say that, but most of that stuff came from Robert Whitaker. Bob Whitaker, the author of Anatomy of an Epidemic. Those slides. He's was a science reporter for the Boston Globe for a long time. And anyway, Anatomy of an Epidemic. If you really want to find out about kind of what's happened, I highly recommend Anatomy of an Epidemic.
So just one final question, Jim. If the system is corrupt, in other words, we can't trust it in order to ensure that the drugs being distributed are going to do the job. So can we, for instance, pass some legislation, or is there anything in the pipe that says, well, if you make this drug and people are negatively affected by it, you will be asked questions and you will be fined, or something like that? I mean, if Paolo, using Paolo as an example, if he's a builder and he builds a building and it falls down, we go and see Paolo.
Yeah, it's pretty hard. I mean, in this arena, and I didn't really talk about the regulators, and they've kind of been captured by the drug industry. I know most about the FDA, but they get most of their funding from the drug companies. But one thing I will say is basically the newer drugs tend not to be any better than the older drugs, and probably not as good, and probably have worse negative effects. And so it's really when the drugs come off patent that you know, and after you've had, you know, almost 20 years of experience on it, that you really know the effects of the drug. So my practical recommendation is don't take any drugs that are still on patent. I mean, they are, you know, which means the drug companies can charge monopoly prices, and they do. And so, you know, if they're not on patent, then they're generic. And the drug companies have started gaming that system, where they're paying these generic makers not to make the drugs or to charge higher prices and stuff. So anyway, I think it's you know, it's a huge problem. I mean, it's gotten to my mind that people who, you know, talk about, quote, science, so much of it is agenda driven, that we don't have, you know, it's pretty hard to find out the truth. It used to be that universities, you know, conducted pretty unbiased research, but in the drug industry now, the universities don't do it. They hire what's called contract research organizations, and you know, it's profit driven. And if they don't come out with the results that they want, you know, then they're not going to get hired the next time. It's a pretty grim picture.
Okay. Well, and I have one question for Jim, but before I go, does anybody have any more questions? Go ahead, Lena. Oh, I think you're muted from your side.
Yeah, I just had to unmute myself there. Thank you very much, Jim. That was very informative. I will try and get that on Amazon, your book. So what's next for you in terms of the whole, you know, utilizing what you've discovered through, you know, this whole process, and how do you think that things could improve going forward?
Well, first off, we really need to stop all the coercion. I mean, there was one of the psychiatrists that testified in my first big Alaska Supreme Court when Lauren Moser, the one who did Soteria, and he testified he'd been with more unmedicated, he called them unmedicated schizophrenics, than anyone alive, he thought. And that he found them among his most interesting customers. But which I think is a good attitude to have. But the thing that he said was, in all his time dealing with people, that he had never had to involuntarily commit someone, because he'd always been able to establish enough of a relationship where they could agree on what course of action to take. He said if someone was going to cause, you know, grievous bodily harm, of course he'd do something, but he had never had to do it. And so we need to reorient the system away from the coercion and try and help people deal with what's going on. And don't say there's something wrong with their brain, because it's not. I mean, if there's something wrong with your brain, it's neurology. So then it kind of abdicates one from responsibility for your action. Oh, that's my mental illness causing me to do that. No, you've got to learn how to deal with it. Okay.
Rhoda, go ahead.
So I have to confess that I have two biases. That one comes from the fact of having lived most of my adult life in Indianapolis. And in Indiana, everything good that you find is traced to the Lilly Foundation. That's where the money comes from for most of the good works that happen around here. So it's hard for me to think of them as a villain. I do agree that there is corruption in the system in general. And one of the evidences of the corruption is the fact that drugs are advertised on television. I want to go to my doctor and have my doctor tell me what she thinks I should have, and I don't want to ask her, I saw this on TV, can I have this? And so that is a corruption in the system to begin with. The other thing is that I have a very close friend whose son in his 30s has is basically has bipolar disorder in a very severe manner, and no one was forcing him to take anything. He'd been to different doctors and they would prescribe different things, and then he would check himself into the stress center, and then you would hear that he had gotten out and he was running around literally naked and had discarded his shoes and clothes, and he was screaming at the top of his lungs. And so, what do? You have to prescribe something. So I'm listening to what you're saying and agreeing that there's corruption in the system and that we shouldn't coerce. But what do? No one was coercing him to take anything. He was seeking help.
Well, I would say he didn't. Distracted. I was going to try and do something to do a link, but I don't think I have time to find it. But there's a YouTube video of me. It's called something like "Escape from Psychiatry: Jim Gottstein's Story," and where I talk about how I deal with it. And I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and so you have to. I wouldn't know about your friend's son because it's all dependent on what the specific circumstances are and stuff. But yeah, I mean, so I come across as kind of anti-psych drugs when I am, but I think people should have the choice to take them. And some people find them helpful, and if they find them helpful, they should have them. I think they should have access to them. If they, I think they should be told the truth about them. But even if they aren't, if they want them, that's fine. So it's a force. So, but I wonder, so why did your friend's son quit taking them? And they cause lots of problems. I mean, the neuroleptics, what I talked about, a lot of people are given lithium, when they're diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and that's very toxic to the kidneys, and you end up a lot of people on dialysis and trying to get a kidney transplant. I had a couple of friends who were on lithium for a while, and they both died prematurely from kidney disease. So,
oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
we're banging
okay,
up
I
at
can
2:55.
shut up now. I can go on for, lawyers get paid by the word, so.
No, actually, I want to ask you a legal
You're
question.
muted, Sal.
And like I said, we're banging up here at 2:55. We're getting
I
close
can't
to
hear
3
you, Sal.
p.m. on the East Coast, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time and let everybody out in time, and maybe
hear you,
have a drink before they go to their next meeting at 3. But I was talking to some lawyers that are more in the oil and gas field, but I want to see how it applies to you and what you did. And they were complaining that if you're a one-man law practice, a sole practitioner, whatever, and you're having a big case against an oil and gas company, one of the strategies they use is to try to overwhelm you with paperwork and motions and hearing and depositions and this, that, and the other thing. Because of course they're a big law firm. They have, let's just say, close to infinite resources. You're a sole practitioner. So they're hoping you'll let something expire or slip up or go past the deadline to win the case that way on that technicality. Did you see that back when you were doing this, or are you seeing it now? I'm interpreting you were a sole practitioner going up against this pharmaceutical company that had access to all these resources. Did you see that, and how were you able to deal with it? And is it getting better? Or is it getting worse? Oh, Jim, you're muted from your side.
Well, he said he couldn't hear you. He couldn't hear you.
Oh, geez, did you miss that whole long question, Jim?
He can't hear you, so somehow his sound went off.
Okay, well, let's do something. It's 2:57, so I do want to let everybody go. I'll get from Jim the link to the YouTube video. I'll try to post that tonight when I'll send out a summary email to everybody. Thank you all for joining me. We'll do this again in 2 weeks. Remember that in 2 weeks is a different link because it's the Tony Robbins special activity. Lena, do you want to say something before we disband? No, I thought you wanted to say something. Okay. All right. Well, listen, I'll send out an email tonight. Thank you all very much. And hopefully I'll see you at the Tony Robbins activity in 2 weeks. And then back here on this channel in
Thank
2
you,
more weeks after that.
Jim.
Thank you.
For being
Thank
here.
you, Sal. Thank you, Jim.
Yeah.
I can't hear. I don't know if people can hear me.
Thank you. Yeah.
Oh,
Now,
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Jim.
see you. Bye. Bye. Thanks again, Sal.
Thank you, Patrick.
Bye, everyone, if you can hear me.